said, we're up to our second segment, which is going to be Brand Nubian. This one is a 1990 album. So we're going back a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
We had a 90, a 91, and a 92 this week.
Okay.
Since 1990. So, Matt, go ahead and give us the numbers.
All right, so One for All by Brand Nubian comes in at number 2,336 in the 1990s on Best Ever Albums. Number 193 in 1990, number 13,754 of all time. It is Brand Nubian's highest rated album on Best Ever Albums. Did not make Rolling Stone's list, and Brand Nubian comes in at number 6,233 of overall artist rankings on Best Ever Albums. So quite different numbers from Slow Dive that we just covered, John.
Wow, yeah, that's a big difference. And I actually don't even know what Josh put in the montage. I could tell you what I would have put in the montage.
What's that?
You want to know what song I would pick for the montage?
Yeah.
I would probably have picked either Ragtime or All for One would have been my two choices. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You want to take the first lead on this one?
Yeah,
John?
man, I really like this album quite a bit. I remember this album in the ether. I was a little young to totally get this album, but three things stood out to me about this album. I love the MCing on this album, and I do know MC Pooba, I believe is right. Is it? Yeah, I think it's MC Pooba. I mean, he references Pooba quite a bit.
Pooba's in there a lot. Pooba, yeah.
Is it MC Pooba? Yeah, check it for me. Clean my stack if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure
he's listed as a producer on this.
He's definitely
Grand Pooba is a producer.
Grand Pooba, but I think he's also the lead
Hang on,
MC.
that's
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because if I remember correctly, I think
up.
the origin story is that he's on this album and then he leaves because
okay.
I know after this, Brand Nubian goes like all in, like they're all in lyrically 5%er here, but they go like all in aggressive 5%er on future albums.
He's listed as a rapper and record producer.
Yeah, I think he's the lead MC on this, and there's other people rapping, but the bars that are the best bars are coming from him, and he is a very creative wordplay rapper. And that's really I find a lot of those rappers that are affiliated with the 5%er stuff, whether it be Rakim or Big Daddy Kane, like I mentioned before. LL Cool J was slightly affiliated with the 5%ers, like lightly, not as much like in there. Nas was another guy who played with 5%er stuff. And if you listen to Nas albums, he does a lot of like numerology, right? And talking about, weightier ideas. And then you've got these guys, PRT, who we did earlier. So there's Talib Kweli who comes late. There's just a lot of people loosely affiliated with it. And when it doesn't get too dogmatic and after a while it's kind of like, all right, the numerology and the 10th equals the star and that equals, it's like kind of the G equals God. You're like, all right, I don't know if I need to know all of that right along the way. And of course there's always the thing that you have to do for the modern ear, which I can adjust to, but other people don't, that you're going to have a complicated relationship with women because they're going to both honor them and look at certain other ones as bitches, which multiple songs definitely make distinctions between, right? Like the honorable most women, but then these other women who are sort of like throwaway women, right? Mm-hmm. And of course, homosexuality, which is a glaring problem on pretty much every 5%er album in this era. But, it's not just them. Hip hop in general, I don't know if was the most progressive in that lane in the 80s and 90s. It's okay. I'm able to compartmentalize along the way. When you take away that type of stuff, though, rhyme schemes are excellent on this. I love the simplistic beats. This, my friend, is New York hip hop. You're not trying to do too much with the beat. It's not necessarily tied to solely funk or 70s soul and stuff. They're picking an eclectic mix of beats. Some are, and usually you're running with a pretty simplistic beat that's designed to not get in the way of the MCing. And to me, what New York hip hop is in this era of time, late 80s, early 90s, is while there's other places, and the South is all about the sound, right? The sound of the coming out of the bass, and the West Coast also has that element, but it's a laid back party style. Don't get me wrong, there's some great MCs in that lane too, but it's different, right? In New York, I think there's like an intellectualism to the hip hop where it's about the craft of the hip hop, Matt, I'd say, is what's going on. This was an album that I thought had a lot of craft. There's well-chosen samples. There's creative lyrics. In that sense, it's similar to some of the things we've covered, like Rakim or De La Soul, or Gangstar, right? It just is
Yeah.
a higher level of bars and verses, and there's alternate rhyme schemes, there's clever plays with words, and there's a desire to want to be taken as sort of a serious type of music, right? That's not just party jams or, living that gangster life. It's almost kind of like a reaction to that. And a lot of these guys grew up like in that world and had flirted with it along the way, and kind of went into this ideology to sort of keep them on the straight and narrow. But that's, I think, to this day, when we talk about hip hop as something to be studied or learned from, or people digging it, like this type of music is the origins of that type of hip hop. The serious, it's not designed to be thrown away. We're not just women, cars, criminal life, stuff like that.
Drinking
we're trying to talk about weightier ideas. In this case, it is tied to a concept of blackness, and like specifically that back to Africa type of idea, like pride, in being black, and uncompromisingly so, which, hey, I say it's not a barrier for me. I'll be honest, because I don't find it to be aggressive or non-inviting.
I wouldn't say we're militant, right?
No, I don't. Yeah, I don't really find. I mean, maybe I know that this wasn't as commercially successful as you would think it would be with how it sounds, and some of it was attributed to like it just didn't have the ability to cross over as easy, which I get in 1990. I think by like the late 90s and the early 2000s, that sort of barrier had dropped, and I think people who were serious about hip hop kind of understood that was a part of the game. So this is a thumbs up for me, because this has high replay ability for me. I also can listen to this for the beats, and I also can kind of dig in, listen to the lyrics, and then study the lyrics, which is something I do love in particularly New York hip hop, which I think, I'll even show my biases. I think that I love hip hop of all parts of the country, but if I'm going for lyrics, I'm going in like sort of that Northeast area for my lyrics in hip hop, because I think more craft was put into it, and the people that later may not have been from areas that put a lot of time into lyrics, like say an Eminem or something, those folks were influenced by it. I also think you can see a lot of what the Wu-Tang Clan would be doing in a couple of years from what this sounds like too. Like a lot of the lyrical themes and the craft of some of the MCs in the Wu-Tang Clan, specifically like Raekwon the Chef and RZA and even Ghostface Killah. There's a lot of what that sounds like in this as well. So, yep, thumbs up for me.
Yeah, there's another group I've never heard of, and I was actually texting with a couple of buddies that I know were into hip hop. I'm like, you guys ever know these guys? Because I've never heard them talk about them. Like they're like, oh yeah,
yeah, man, they're a pretty big deal in the community of like literate hip hop, right?
Yeah. So, but from the moment I started listening to this, and you want to talk, okay, so this is a long album. This is this is what I was thinking of when you brought it up with Slow Dive. It's just like, I think you're right. I think some of this in the 90s was, hey, there's this new thing. It's a CD. We can make albums. We can pack everything into this if you want. Like double albums are now single albums. And I think some of them seem like they were doing it because this is almost like, this is over 70 minutes,
and De La Soul made huge long albums as well.
Yeah.
So like that was sort of a hallmark of this style of hip hop at this time.
And I don't know if there's any genre where I'm like, okay, that's warranted just generally for a studio album. So that's really my only knock, is that it's just wow, this is still going, and it's but I love this sound. And I've been talking about this with De La Soul and Tribe Called Quest and Gangstar, all this stuff and I'm looking here at the genres.
Are you becoming a head, Matt? Is that what's happening to you? You're slowly becoming a head?
I just think that like this, but because there are different styles within hip hop, right? And I think this is something that generally I'm going to gravitate towards more than gangster rap, for example, right? Which I still like a lot of some of the beats and the production there that Dr. Dre did and whatever is still really awesome. But I think that I connect more with this. And I think, and I'm just looking at this here, it's like, yes, it says East Coast hip hop. conscious hip hop, alternative hip hop. Maybe that's a good term for it because, these are not. I think that these are artists that
I
in
always call it
retrospect,
consciousness hip hop, or
consciousness
like
hip hop.
that's what I or
Yeah,
like literate hip hop, like is kind of
conscious. This says golden age hip hop. I don't know if that's
Golden Age is that New York style. Golden Age is
okay.
considered to be stripped down but creative beats, smart sample selection, and of course MCing that is
Yeah,
top tier. Yeah.
and all that. Yeah, certainly all that stuff is here. I love it in hip hop when they just take a lot of like great, what seems to me to be like 70s funk, soul, R&B, like classic riffs and beats, and then they rap over that, right? And a lot of the rapping here is just comes at you so fast, right? And it's one of those things. It's like, how are they keep going and going and going with the wordplay and then the different MCs kind of trading off on verses and stuff, and it's very danceable. It's very catchy. It's very, it's really easy to get into. And I also, not for nothing, but it's like, this is something I could play in my house
Well,
with
it's
my
interesting.
family
Can I
and
answer?
not have to worry about,
Right.
like misogyny. Like, you're right. There might be some like tones here and there, but it's not this overt, like
Right.
Ice Cube, NWA, like, okay, there's no way I can't play this at work. Like, I played this album at work this week with no problem,
Yeah.
right? And it's just, there's something about that that's just, I feel more comfortable listening to it because of that. Sometimes when I listen to not just rap, but other, like if there's rock music that's like overtly, graphic in their language, it's not like I don't know if I'm calling. Maybe I'm a little prudish, but like there's part of me that feels like I can't listen to this in public, because it's going to draw attention to myself, and I don't want that, where this is something that's way more easily digestible and accessible and appropriate, I guess. So there's part of that that's appealing for me too.
So it's interesting that I pulled up Golden Age hip hop to see how close my definition was, how I was doing it.
Yeah.
And one of the things I thought you said is funk. And I'm like, I never think of Golden Age hip hop having funk beats. And it's interesting that here's how they describe it, Matt. So I did okay in my description. Overwhelmingly based in New York City, Golden Age rap is characterized by skeletal beats. Okay, so I'm on some there. Samples cribbed from rock or soul tracks and tough diss raps. The idea of complex wordplay and lyrical kung fu of later hip hop originated in this era, as do some of the golden MCs in the genre's history. So that's a little bit of a description there. And if we want to go with alternative rap is hip hop that refuses to conform to any of the traditional stereotypes of rap, such as gangsta, funk, or bass.
So you're not hearing any funk in this at all?
I do not. I mean, there's bits, but I do not hear it as anywhere near as much as I do in certainly West Coast hip hop,
Okay.
and even in later 90s 2000s hip hops, where a lot of the simple, it's not that there isn't funk, but I think of these beats as very they say skeletal, and I said stripped down would be the beats that's like very conscious, but the beat is designed to not get in the way of,
But
like if you're doing a beat like Still DRE, right? Like for example, like
Yeah.
that beat's gonna overwhelm no matter how good the bars are. And in that case, it's funny that I picked that one because basically Jay-Z wrote that song, right, for Dr. Dre and Eminem. And the bars are good, but what you remember about that song is the beat, right? You're not going to necessarily remember any of these beats. You're going to nod your head to it, but it's designed in the way they structure these beats for you to pay attention to the hip hop. And that's why it's similar to something like Wu-Tang Clan. Like Wu-Tang Clan has, sort of a beat that sticks, but then it's kind of repetitive. Nas is the same thing. It's just these beats, Mob Deep, right? These are not beats to overwhelm the MC. If the 80s was the DJ, right? Like this part of hip hop is about like, listen to what this dude has to say. And like, I can't think of listening to this type of hip hop without digging into the lyrics to see what they're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because you're right. Even though I really like a lot of the beats that are happening here and the samples that they are using, the hooks don't get embedded in your head the way they do with some of those other other artists that you're talking
No,
about.
it's
Maybe that's more of a,
individual bars. You're
yeah,
designed to pull like, oh, I love these bars right from this, and that's what it is because
which is so
they're
interesting for
spending
me
so
because
much time writing like in a notebook, right? Like trying to get you
yeah.
to, and like I think of my buddy Jeff who loves this golden age of hip hop, and like he'll just drop individual bars, right? Joking around at different things when we're talking in life. Sometimes it's like, it'll be like, it's like what Brand Nubian said, and then this bar that's like could be embedded right in like a rhyme scheme that's being used
And
right
I
here. Yeah.
and that's probably why at the end of the day, the biggest barrier for me in hip hop is the focus on the lyrics and that being an essential part of what's happening. And my
Well, not in all hip
inability
hop,
to
but this hip hop, yes.
but right, but just in general, right? Like the appreciation of the MC. My appreciation of the MC comes from just being impressed. Man, that guy's saying a lot of words really fast and it sounds cool. Like that's like it's like the very
Okay.
surface level, and I am picking apart some things that he's saying here and there, but it's snippets. It's not like I'm piecing, it's not like what you're saying and you're kind of like, let me dissect and figure out and study what's going on here. It's like I'm picking out bits and pieces and I'm getting a general like idea of what's happening, of what he's talking about, but then I kind of get lost in the beat again,
Yeah.
and the rhythm and whatever, and I don't, so it's hard for me to kind of come back and dissect it or talk about it. But all I know is the sound that they are getting from this, whether it be the samples, the actual beat that they're playing, the MC, that like how fast he's rapping, or the intonation of his voice. It's all like the sonic template of what I'm gravitating towards, and I just think that this is chock full of great elements of that are
Sure.
just, as soon as I hear it, I'm like, oh, that sounds great. I want to just be in that moment with that part of the song.
They're poets, and that's where I
Yeah.
hate when I'm not a big fan of like free verse poetry, because I think what makes poetry great, and I do like poetry, is the ability to say profound things, but also in a structure that gives it almost like a melodic or a musical sense. And when you have free verse, right, it kills that. It's all just word salad, right? I think it's kind of like the idea. It's not so much that Shakespeare wrote the best sonnets. It's that Shakespeare could say profound things in a sonnet format, right? And that's a little bit of what this is. And we talked about this last week and we had a disagreement. It was definitely a 2-on-1, but not in a bad way. But you and Josh were both basically like, I don't know why you're so stuck on this lyrics. And I thought about it quite a bit. I'm like, am I? But the reason I am is because when this was presented around me, which, make no mistake about it, like this era of hip hop is the hip hop the kids in my school were listening to, along with the commercial stuff, and the message that was being given by the old heads, so to speak, right around this is, yeah, there's that fun stuff and that's good in the club, but real, and at this time, by the way, it was rap. Hip hop was still like real rap is this. And like, if you want to know what real rap sounds like, listen to, De La Soul, listen to, Brand Nubian, listen to PRT, listen to
Tribe
Big
Called
Daddy
Quest.
Kane, Rakim, Tribe Called Quest. Yeah, I mean that, and they both could exist, but like because of that, and then when people said real, it would have been insulting if you didn't listen to the lyrics, because what made it real was these guys had flow, and they had identifiable flow, right? Not start stop flow or sing songy flow or stuff like that. They had like their own, and you kind of like connect it with flows, and you connected with their bars. So when you were saying why'd you focus so much on De La Soul's lyrical content, it was almost impossible for me to not understand why you guys didn't.
Oh, it wasn't so much. No, that was that. I think no, that had more to do with the skits. You were like, if the skits weren't there, this album couldn't. I don't know. Clearly, anybody like connecting with a rap song or album, it totally makes sense to me why the lyrics are important. But I think that in that particular conversation, I think it was more about the skits, because Josh was certainly like not a fan, and I was like, whatever, it's fine. But that you were like, it needs to be there because for this album to be what it is. So I think that's what the conversation was. But your point is taken, and I also would say yes to what you just said. And there's something about that type of the golden age, the real hip hop, real rap, whatever you want to call it. There's also a sonic difference musically. There's a difference in the production. It's a jazzier feel. It's more of a soul feel from the 70s.
Oh yeah.
Whereas and so it's not just about the lyrical content. It's also about the choices that they're making in the production and the samples in the music as well that go hand in hand, really, it seems to me. And so that's why I'm finding myself gravitating more towards this or the Gang Starr or De La Soul or Tribe Called Quest more than I do. And even though I liked Ice-T and Ice Cube and some of the NWA stuff, it's like I connect more with this. I would rather listen to this.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And it's funny, they don't just sample soul and stuff. They sample like pretty prominently, like Slow Down's like What I Am by Edie Brickell.
Oh, right. Yeah, Edie Brickell. Yes. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And stuff like that. So it's interesting, what they're sampling along the way.
Or they're just doing that with the Billy Joel, The Way You Are. It's not a
Yes.
sample, but they just threw in that, that the chorus of The Way You Are, in their own song. So yeah. No, but I like this. Like, and if I just wonder if I had been exposed to this, because this is also like, I think maybe a more popular band, or at least one that I remember being on MTV or being more exposed to, like that I would assume would fall in this lane would be something like Arrested Development. But
they were the one that, they had the positivity thing. And I think that's why they crossed over, right? Because they also were from the South.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a different, like, in the South, I don't know how to describe, like, the South, you almost had to play it more mainstream because it was the South, right? Whereas you could be in New York City and be like, nah, this ain't for you if you come along with it, And I think that's what the barrier, I mean, you said, like, how did I not come across this? I think if you weren't in, like, the mid-Atlantic, Northeast, that like New York to DC corridor was really where this hit and then went out to the rest of the world, right? Like, and I lived in there, and I lived near a city. And so as a result, this was the primary music for people.
No, I was getting more Chattahoochee.
Yeah. No, and I'm not even saying that negative. It's just
what it is.
If I had been born, and I could have easily been, right, in Western Pennsylvania, I would have none of this context. I just accidentally happened to be born where this was in the ether before other stuff came. Right. And so, like, as a result, this is the hip hop. And what sounded exotic to me was when, like, the Chronic and Dr. Dre type stuff started hitting. And I'm like, oh, wow, this is a different sound.
Yeah.
You know what I
mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I was getting like MC Light, or not MC Light, like Young MC, right? Vanilla Ice and stuff. And that was fine. But I was always getting it backed up with the equivalent of, like,
but so then it became,
but yeah,
but this became, so this was more regional, but that other stuff, like the Dr. Dre, like gangster rap, that was the stuff that went national.
Well, that was regional, the stuff too, that took off. Crossed over.
But it eventually blew up and went on to MTV. They sold a bunch of records. It's like, even if you weren't into rap, you knew Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg. Like, I've never heard of Brand Nubian until last week.
Well, MTV wasn't going to promote a 5%er group.
Yeah.
Look at all the people we talked about. We loved the Rakim album. We didn't do Big Daddy Kane, but he's great, right? Mm-hmm. PRT, you said this week you like that song, right? You've got this, there's all kinds of stuff, right, that is in that. But I think at the time let's call it what it is. The 5%er movement was a break off of the Nation of Islam. And were you going to give a platform, right, in 1990 and 1991 to folks that were basically members of the Nation of Islam?
But they weren't all that. Was Gang? I don't remember. Was Gang Starr or Tribe Called Quest part of that?
And Tribe would get some play. They
got some
soul and
they got Scenario. That was the one song that I remember being like.
Well, Benita Applebaum was pretty popular on their first album. I Lost My Wallet and El Segundo. Those were all, like, I remember seeing all of them on MTV. And, De La Soul had, like, Me, Myself, and I. Yeah. So, I mean,
it's just not to the degree that Snoop and Dre and.
Because hip hop, I mean, think about what was hip hop basically that was crossing over during that time had to have a song that was massively popular that they put, like, Young MC had Jamie's Crying, right? Super Freak for You Can't Touch This, Under Pressure by Vanilla Ice, right? Mm-hmm. All of these, basically you were just hearing a version of a song you already liked that was on it. Like the original hip hop, you had like LL Cool J, maybe you could say, was breaking through, at this point.
Yep.
But he was largely breaking through, I think, because like the Beastie Boys broke through.
Yeah.
So.
No, it's interesting. It's just, there's so many. I'm just finding more of these types of this sound. This is what I'm gonna probably gravitate more towards in rap than
there's
than
gonna be
the
a
more
lot
mainstream
more in the
stuff.
90s. And we haven't even gotten to offshoots of this. Like we're gonna have more stuff that's right in this lane, and then we're gonna have the offshoots. That'll be interested to hear you do, like Mos Def and Pharoah Monch and Talib Kweli, Wu-Tang Clan, Nas. I mean, there's Jurassic 5.
I know some
Common.
of that stuff. Oh yeah, for sure. Yep.
All those people are gonna come. So, and I'll be interested to see what your takes are on this.
I
Not
will
to mention
say, though,
like Guru, right? Like breaks off of Gangstar and stuff. So
I will say though, this album's too long.
It is. That is a knock. That is
16
absolutely
tracks.
a knock. Yep.
Yeah.
And I do get a little bit tired of like the numerology stuff. It's like, okay, let's move on a little bit from that theme. But still, easy thumbs up.
Oh yeah, absolutely.